All right, guys, today's video and plant of focus is winter peas. I'm going to get into the pros and cons of these plants. And like normal, I'm going to start with the cons and work our way to the pros. This particular plant doesn't have a lot either way as far as compared to, like, say, chestnut trees or soybeans, but it does have a beneficial role for anyone doing deer plots. And of course, you can actually eat these if you wanted to. So here's the con I'm going to start off with. Initially, when you plant these, this is considered a cool season plant. You generally plant it in September, October, of course, maybe even August. It all depends on what part of the country you live in, where your planting dates for your fall and winter. Initially, for me, these plants don't get very big right off the bat. They hang around, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 inches, and that's about as big as they get before the cold kind of keeps them from growing anymore. So you may not get the tonnage you want out of them initially. And because the winter gets colder and colder as it progresses, if a deer comes in and, nips this off like it did here, it may not necessarily regrow right away. It may be super slow in developing that type of regrowth. So you kind of have to be mindful of that. If you plant pure stands of this, it can be great at first, and then food quality can diminish if it can't grow back fast enough to cover what deer eat off of it. Also, this is another thing that you'll learn with any plant that you purchase for food plots. There are always subspecies or variants of different plants. So for instance, the winter pea has a forage version, which is what I set out. This is the 410 version. And then there's like an Australian version. There's other ones. There's like a 736, 724s. There's all kinds of different versions of this same plant. But each of those versions has a different trait. Some traits are designed to grow large winter peas. Other traits are smaller winter peas. Some are faster growing, some are slower growing. And just by throwing out a bunch of winter peas and not necessarily seeing what you're actually setting out can affect what grows in your plot and your deer. So I shoot for the forage variety, which gets bigger. That helps with some other items that I'm going to get into on the pro side of things. So kind of keep that thought in your head somewhere along the way here. But overall, initially, you're not going to be happy with maybe how fast it grows right off. But don't worry, you're going to get the other half of this. So to me, this plant, for best purposes in growing this type of pea, I think you need companion crops to go with it. These plants are basically like a vine. Treat it like a vine. Vine needs anything it can get to wrap around, latch onto, and grow upwards. So what I have noticed is on my winter peas, for any of the peas that don't have the ability to latch on to other plants, those particular vines don't get as large as my other peas like this that are growing up something and have, some sort of support system to help hold it up. Winter peas also have a sensitivity to nutrients in the soil. So if you have really poor ground, you're not going to get winter peas this large. I'm sorry. Any plant that is in poor soil will not be at optimal growing rates or sizes. You might surprise yourself by just how large some of these winter peas actually get versus maybe a subspecies that's more designed for farmers that grows shorter but produces more pods. Now, I have not seen deer eat pods out of here, but my only rebuttal to that would be the fact that I cut this stuff down or till it down before it really gets a chance to develop deeply. But deer still love it as far as the greenery goes. So that's kind of a few cons that this plant presents. It's not a good plant to shade out other species. At least in my opinion, it's not. Because if you're looking here, right now it's basically a single stalk and I can see right through it. So your only problem is it's not that good of a weed suppressor unless you plant it in full thick stands. Then you won't get any weeds growing up through it whatsoever. It'll look like a jungle. All right, so let's go ahead and move to the pros. The cons aren't all that bad, but let's get into the pros of this plant. So as far as the winter time goes, this plant is very cold hardy. I would almost put it on the scale of what cereal rye is. Not quite there, but it's pretty close. I have a lot of surviving winter peas. You do have, you know, some die off. That's to be expected. Not every plant's going to be functioning right, or maybe bugs or insects or something under the soil's causing that. But overall, the plant is extremely cold hardy. It is drought tolerant. Maybe not as good as cereal rye, but it is a drought tolerant plant. They contain a lot of water, so roughly 70-75% of this plant contains water. So this is another great benefit to deer when they need their water needs without having to go to creeks and streams to get that. They can eat these plants and get quite a bit of water. Now here's another thing. For those of you that pick the right subspecies for deer, these particular forage winter peas get very large. This guy is still growing a lot. It is growing very quickly now. Once spring hits, just like a lot of these species over here, they bolt. It takes off and grows very rapidly. I would put it nearly the same scale as what turnips do when it comes time for winter peas to take off, because you can see I've got them everywhere in here. Various sizes, even here, all growing very, very healthy. So the protein that gets into the health of the plant, what kind of nutrition does this type of plant offer? Your baseline nutrition on the bottom end of healthier ground is roughly 20 to 25% as far as the amount of protein in here. Of course, you got your trace minerals that's in here, zinc, iron, copper, whatever's in your soil, this plant can still take up and give it to deer. This plant is also a legume. That's great. I've actually have a plant in my fall and winter blends other than clover that is producing nitrogen. So it's not on the scale of clover just because of how big the plant is. The roots are smaller. They don't expand out as far as other plants. So it does a good job for plants that's within the vicinity of it. So you can see how wide that cereal rye is right there. So we move out of the root zone, and now we're down to smaller looking plants again. So these are helping each other out here. With the carbon this thing secretes, this one also secretes carbon, but larger scale amounts of carbon versus this plant. Again, different type of plant, different root, different carbon. Benefits are great when it comes to helping your soil out. Another pro is these plants are edible. So, I mean, not just for deer, but you yourself can make salads out of these. If you wanted to, you can even eat the pods when they develop. They are pretty tough pods, I will give them that. Another great thing is the biomass this plant can create for those of you that pick the forage version of winter peas. So this winter pea is approaching a little over 2.5 feet in height. By the time I'm ready to till this down, which will be toward the middle or end of April, I would say that winter pea would easily be somewhere up into here. It could go taller than that. Every year my ground's gotten better. These peas have gotten bigger than the previous year. So I'm not going to tell you where the top end is. I mean, it might be 4 feet, it might be 5 feet, could be 6 feet. You just never know on some of these forage varieties. Just depends on what genetics in them. But overall, I think this is a great plant to have in your food plot. The attraction level of these is very high. I would put it probably not quite as high as clover. I would say it lands somewhere between what maybe your winter wheat, your oats. I would say it's pretty comparable to what that attraction level is. I think it's a great opportunity here for deer to be drawn in. And here I'll show you a browse on this one. So even though deers eat that off, it will send out new shoots out of here at some point and keep on growing. So just because they come in and cut it off doesn't mean the plant stops, but its regeneration ability, in my opinion, is not as good as some of the other plants. So that's kind of a trade-off, which I'm fine with because I have so many other species in here that deer eat on that I'm not worried about it. But definitely a great plant to have. Grows very quickly in the springtime. Rapid growth compared to what it looks like in the fall and winter. So it has all winter long to develop roots, and then when the spring shows up, it'll let you know how good those roots have grown just by how fast and how large they get. I've actually had a little bit larger leaves than those. Of course, I'm not in a completely restored area yet. This has probably still got another 2 or 3 years before I'm satisfied with it, but definitely looks great. So again, that's the plant of focus, is winter peas, and I highly recommend these in your plots. All right, guys, you all have a great day, and I hope this video helps.